Hello, my dear ones. Welcome to another material on our channel in another episode. Dear ones, you asked me for information about the polar vortex. Powell, get it together, finally take a look at this polar vortex, because they are saying it's breaking apart. Here, on the other hand, they say it's not breaking apart, but that it's getting stronger. Hell, what could I have done? We need to see what's happening here, and I invite you to look at how the situation with the polar vortex looks. But what is very important is to agree on when the polar vortex is beneficial for us in terms of snowfall and when it is not, because that's where we need to start. Generally, the polar vortex is already over the northern hemisphere. Absolutely. But now, we need to answer the question of whether it is stabilizing or not, and why a stable polar vortex is important for us in terms of winter or its absence. So let's begin. Here on the left side, we see a stable polar vortex. So, the polar vortex, which beautifully spins over the North Pole, we have cold air here. This cold air is blocked. It is held back by the ring of westerly winds, that is, winds blowing towards the west. Meanwhile, below, we also have the jet stream, which also meanders weakly, and this cold air is maintained. Here over northern Canada, over Scandinavia, or even further up around the Arctic Circle. Then the situation is such that winter is mild, it is gentle, and we do not have too much trouble related to snow. However, at this moment I will turn off the camera, and here in the second picture you see a situation when the vortex is not stable. In this situation, the jet stream meanders. Here we see north, south, north, south. Now on the southern side of this jet stream, warm air is flowing in. And this warm air reaches, among others, Europe, among others the States, depending on how the meander, this jet stream moves. On the other hand, a cold air mass flows down on the northern side of this meander. Such a situation occurred. For example, in recent days, and in fact we are observing it now as well, it is a situation when cold air flows down sharply, which has been happening in recent days in Poland. Then this cold air is displaced by significantly warmer air, which is currently happening right now, for example, over Poland. So, my dear friends, having this information, we can move on, and we move on to the next image. This time we have stratobserve.com, and we can observe what is happening at this moment according to the GFS model. Here we have the highest altitude. I will change the font to red. Here we have the highest altitude, here we have the level. The seas, there is of course Europe, and somewhere here is Poland, so we need to pay attention to the fact that in this place we have Poland. Well, we see that this polar vortex is quite well developed. It is very well developed here. Still here on the lower side, from the side of the United States, not necessarily, because there we have a high pressure system. However, generally speaking, it looks quite okay. One could say, let's check the next hours. This is the state on the 22nd. Here we have the state, the 27th. As we can see, this vortex is very well developed, and in the following hours it is evident that it is strengthening. It is very stable and is continuously strengthening. This means for us roughly that we will not have such strong, sudden influxes of fertile air masses in the near future. Okay, here we have the structure up to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And with each click of the structure, we see that here, without major changes, we have the strengthening of this vortex. So it should remain stable at least until the 8th. By the 8th of December, we see that it will likely look without major changes. Here we have a view from the north, saying from the north sounds wrong, a view of the northern hemisphere. And we see how it will shape up in the coming days, how it will slowly move, but generally, stabilization is indeed visible. This is what you asked about, whether it is stabilizing or not. Yes, it is stabilizing. This stabilization is very clearly visible. Let's take a look at the speeds of the westerly winds, specifically those that are very high in the stratosphere and which block this polar vortex, allowing it to spread sideways. And here we see the current state. Here we have November 25th. We need to take into account that we are somewhere here, November 24th, 23rd. And we had a weakening of the polar vortex actually in the previous days. But now day by day we see that these westerly winds will strengthen to even 50 meters per second after December 5th. And these are very nice and very specific speeds for these winds. Specifically for these westerly winds, and such speeds help to keep the polar vortex in check. Here we have two more images, this time from ECMWF. Probably recognize these images from my previous materials from last year, as we have already worked on them. And now it is very important, the significant blue chart, and in total we see that there are a lot of these charts. They are diverging. Here in the further area, it means that these forecasts are becoming increasingly uncertain. But what interests us, my dear, is this, how to put it well, this arrow, what the arrow shows, this blue line, which is clearer than the others, is the average that has been drawn. However, here we have, again, the average marked in red. Generally, it looks like this. Simply put, the higher they are above that red line, the better for the polar vortex. So we see that starting from the 23rd, day by day, the westerly wind will become stronger, thus it will be intensifying here. It will intensify to approximately 40 or even 50 meters per second. This is expected to happen on November 30th or December 1st. Then this wind should certainly maintain that speed until, my dear, practically the end of December. Well, what does that mean for us, to put it simply? That what we saw in previous calculations of positive and negative anomalies regarding temperatures in December, and what we saw in the ECMWF model calculations for December in one of the previous episodes, it is increasingly likely that we will have rather few winter events in December. Temperatures will be mostly above zero, and moreover there will be rainfall. So it seems that the December holiday tradition will be maintained, and we will have rainfall during the holidays. At the beginning of January, we may have a situation related to rain, snow, or the inflow of cooler air masses, because here we see that at the beginning of January, this vortex should start to weaken. Well, I will honestly tell you that I am not surprised at all, because we have had such a situation quite often lately. Well, having that, move on to the next calculations. Now let's focus directly on having that. We move on to the next calculations. The GFS model is already in such a visualization, and we will see how it is with this GFS model. We have the calculations from the GFS model here. Let's start with the wind at an altitude of 10 hectopascals, which is the wind at very high altitudes and which will cause the polar vortex to be blocked. Here we can see perfectly. This polar vortex is located here. I will mark it as W. I will also mark Poland here, my dear, so that we know here is Poland. So we have everything now, and we see that in the coming days this polar vortex is here. These westerly winds are getting stronger. The more developed their color, the darker it is, the stronger the wind blows, especially here in the area of Europe, Siberia, and Alaska, where we have the strongest gusts over the states. It looks weaker. Perhaps we will have a bigger winter attack there. However, here the situation is unlikely to change much until the end of December. However, then we see not so much a breakdown as a weakening of this vortex. Perhaps there will be meanders in the jet stream, and at the beginning of January we can expect something with heavier snowfall and greater runoff. A question for you, is anyone waiting for something like that? Let's check the jet streams here at lower altitudes, 300 HPA, 3 kilometers. Look how beautifully they are shaping up here. And here it catches our eye practically. Always certain. Definitely hear the same thing until the end of December. Well, I mean until the end of December, until the beginning of December, until the middle of December, somewhere around the 3rd, 4th. We see that these jet streams are rather directing northward, bypassing Poland from the north. What does this mean for us? That we will be in a warmer air zone, so we probably won't be able to dream of a strong snowy winter here. And secondly, less precipitation due to the fact that a high-pressure weather system is forming here, while the lows will be moving more to the north of Poland. Well, we already know this from somewhere, unfortunately or fortunately, from the previous days. All right, having this information, let's move on, my dear friends. And let's check the state of the polar vortex, and generally the temperatures at an altitude of 10 hectopascals, which is already high in the stratosphere. And we see that the temperatures will be very, very low. levels of -70, -80 degrees Celsius, 70, 80 degrees. Even at the beginning of December, we will have -82, -83 degrees Celsius somewhere over Scandinavia. So the temperatures will be really, really low. And the jet stream, polar vortex is stable here. Let's check the temperatures at a height of 2 meters. And as I previously mentioned to you earlier, we are likely going to have quite mild weather in Europe. From time to time, waves of warmer air from the Atlantic should reach us here in this area, just as is happening right now. However, we do not see anything more severe here. As I mentioned, the situation will look completely different over Canada, especially at the beginning of December, where there will be a flow of very cold air masses. It will be really, really harsh in terms of temperatures. Here, of course, it will be less harsh because, as I mentioned here, we will have inflows of these warmer air masses, and the jet stream will meander here roughly in this way, bypassing Poland, so to speak. At least, that's how it looks at the moment. As we see how it will be later, we will of course see in our upcoming materials. Thank you for being here, and well, I warmly greet you all. Bye.